In college football world, I think approval ratings, job approval ratings are a little bit different than the political world, because in the political world, like if you're gauging the approval rating of a president, everybody in the country has got a say. But if I'm gauging the opinion of a college football coach's job approval rating, I only care about that fan base. And so they're much more in tune, and you're getting a much more accurate read on what a fan base feels than if I'm trying to find out what 335 million people think about one person. So we start going around these conferences this time of year. And tonight, I wanted to start with some of the coaches in the SEC. Josh Heupel's job approval rating at Tennessee, I would put it north of 80% right now. Now, here's the irony. They just went to the college football playoff. So you would think, oh, yeah, man, he's coming off a playoff appearance. Now, they got shellacked once they got there. Never warm up with your shirt off if you're from the South in sub-freezing conditions. Lesson learned by all of us at the hands or expense, rather, of Tennessee. But I don't even think his job approval rating is this high just because they went to the playoff. Because I would bet you, I can't prove this, but I would bet you that if you polled Tennessee fans just prior to kickoff of that playoff game, they don't know they're going to get blown out. They just know they're in the playoff. I bet Josh Heupel's job approval rating is higher now than it was at kickoff of that game. And I'm going to tell you why. Because they stood up to Nico Iamaleava and his camp and told him goodbye. And you had an opinion about that if you live in Spokane, Washington, but I promise you the opinion in and around Knoxville, Tennessee was much different. They loved it. And they acknowledge, some of them do, that it may even set them back this year. They're hopeful it doesn't. But if it cost them a win or two this year, for the greater good of the stability and integrity of the program, they were proud. And I think they approve of him because of that. Also, he's won a whole lot, and there's that as well. So if Heupel was, 50-50, that Nico thing would have sounded and felt a lot much different. But he's not. He's already, secured job security-wise. But also, he's resurrected Tennessee football, which is where we always have fascination about the age of a viewer. Because if you're 16 years old, versus if you're 46 years old, that means a much different thing to you. If you're 16 years old, you rewind 4 years, about the time you probably develop the mental wherewithal to understand what's going on is about the time Heupel takes the job. So you didn't know the Derek Dooley era. You only have read about the Lane Kiffin era, which was 1 year, by the way. You're not familiar with Butch Jones. You're not necessarily familiar with what the wilderness has been for Tennessee, and you're not familiar that Tennessee used to be a national powerhouse. Well, they always could have been. They weren't for a while. They are again, thanks to Josh Heupel. He brought Tennessee football back. And for that, I've got him polling at north of 80% approval rating amongst Tennessee fans. You might ask, well, why not 90 plus? Well, because he hadn't won anything of substance for the crowd that thinks the only way to validate yourself as a major head coach is to win a championship. I don't share that, but there are people who feel that way. I'm not going to tell them how to think. I'm just here to report the facts, and this is science on this show. 80%, Josh Heupel. Good job. Congratulations to the folks over there in Knoxville. All right, next up, this is a tricky one. This is tricky. Brian Kelly at LSU. What do you think his job approval rating would be amongst LSU fans? I think he is at about 65%. That seems strange. 10 wins, 9 wins. So that added up. We had Stats and Info run those numbers, and it turns out that's 29 wins over a 3-year period, including a trip to the SEC championship game in his first year, a win over Bama in his first year. It's the beneath the surface stuff that I think would drag Kelly's approval rating down. Still 65%. It's still really good. This is the SEC, after all. I think there are a few factors in play here, okay? First is, a lot of LSU fans would look at the Jaden Daniels year and rightly say they wasted having a Heisman Trophy winner because they were terrible defensively. He put that staff together, so that's on him. Still a pretty good year, but you got the best quarterback in the country. You got a future first-round draft pick, and you got the Heisman Trophy winner. You got to do more at LSU than just above average, like really good. You should be a national championship winner. You should at the very least be in the game with that. And they weren't anywhere close because they, as Meemaw would say, couldn't stop molasses in December. Well, that was on Brian Kelly. And so he had to course correct. And I intentionally phrase it like this. LSU had to course correct in their hiring. and that's both on the staff and in the front office. LSU had to course correct. You'll notice they just really went crazy in the portal this last cycle. They've set themselves up potentially to compete for a national title this year. That's because LSU had to make that decision. Now, the closer you get to the program, I think the closer you get to diehard fans, and diehard fans would also tell you Brian Kelly didn't build up a whole lot of equity with Louisianans the way he came into LSU because he didn't necessarily wrap his arms around Louisiana. Publicly, he did. He said all the right things. Behind the scenes, there was sort of a flush of a lot of Louisiana flavor out of that building. Now, if you win, that doesn't matter. I got why Brian Kelly did what he did, but it didn't work right out of the gate. And so they had to course correct and bring a lot of folks back in to the building there and back into LSU who know LSU and who know Louisiana. And you know what? If they win at the end of the day, if they're playing in Atlanta in December, if they're a 7 seed in the playoff or better or whatever, then all this is a moot point. The reason I think he doesn't poll as high as maybe a guy averaging 9.5 wins per year over his first 3 years would poll is because I think maybe behind the scenes, there's just a little friction here and there sometimes that can drag that down. The next one's not difficult at all. Hey, quick time out. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. The next one will probably take about 30 seconds. Kirby Smart at Georgia. #1 head coach in the country, I agree. #1 program in the country, I would say Georgia. Still, I agree. So if you've got the #1 head coach leading the #1 program, that's 90+%. That's as high as we go here. We don't go higher than 90% on the job approval rating. So amongst Georgia fans, clearly, if you got to 100, Kirby would be as close to 100 as you can get. And there are few holdouts who just want to see the world burn to the ground, who would disapprove of Kirby Smart's job approval, would disapprove of it and say something like, blah, 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 Mike Bobo. That would be the reason. Mike Bobo. It's the butt Bobo syndrome. And that is, what a beautiful day. What a great afternoon with the family, but Bobo. There are people in my home state who would end any joyful sentence with but Bobo. Because you got to bring it back down to earth. You got to sandbag the balloon every now and then. But yeah, Kirby Smart, man. He's made Georgia what a lot of folks, myself included, always thought Georgia could be, but never had been. There was like a couple of rungs on the ladder that some people didn't think existed, but I've always thought that was crazy. There were the 2 or 3 higher rungs on the ladder that Georgia football could always climb. He's just the one who did it. And I mean, 100 years from now, they'll talk about that. So yeah, Kirby, sky-high job approval rating. What about the next guy? What about the guy he faced off with in Atlanta last year in the SEC championship game? His name, Steve Sarkisian. His job approval rating amongst Texas fans, I've got at a solid 85%, not 90. 90 is the highest we go. It's not quite there yet. I do think it's sky high. They're an obvious superpower program. Anyone who argues otherwise, we obviously define superpower different, I guess. So there are some nits that you can pick with Steve Sarkisian, but they get drowned by a flood of positivity. So the positivity is talent acquisition, maybe the best program in the country right now, just an army of high-level people in all walks of a football program that are in the building there in Austin. This, though, is not 90%, because there is a group out there that requires you to have national championship rings, or at least one, on your finger before they're going to validate you as being a successful head coach at the University of Texas. You got about 5 programs out there that think to themselves, until a coach has won a national championship here, he hasn't won me over. I have told you before, I'll tell you again, I think that's a fairly psychotic way to live your life or to view this world through the prism of, but you're free to do that. It is in the Constitution. It's 13th, 14th Amendment, somewhere around there. You're free to do that. But although that is irrational, it is real. And so that gets us around to the other side of the coin, the less visited side of the coin, you know, the 15% thumbs down on Steve Sarkisian's side of the coin. And those people would say, Well, big deal. He's taken the head job at Texas, and we've recruited a lot of talent. Texas was always talented. That's lie number one. I don't have time to go down that road tonight because we got a loaded show. At no point during the past decade and a half did Texas's roster look remotely comparable to what it looks like right now. Not even remotely comparable. So miss me, save that. Just miss me with all that. And the second thing they'll say is, well, I mean, if they're so good, why did they lose to Georgia twice last year? Because Georgia was pretty good too. That's it. Are we going to denigrate the guy's status as a pretty high-level head coach because he didn't beat, by near universal standards, the number one coach in the game right now? That's sort of the same crowd that says James Franklin's the most overrated head coach in America. Why? Because he can't beat Ohio State. Well, no one said he's better than Ryan Day. Well, I don't see people placing Steve Sarkisian above Kirby Smart right now. I could see it happen one day, but no one's saying it right now. So, absent placing them as the literal number one program in the country and him as the number one head coach in the country, I'm happy saying I think Texas fans approve of Steve Sarkisian at an overwhelming rate right now. Next up, South Carolina. Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Job approval rating as of today, 75% amongst Gamecock fans. He's coming off a 9-4 season, and that really helps because I think this number would have been much lower had we done this segment this time last year. I know it was because we did, and it was lower. Shane Beamer is what we call a PPF, not a PFF, a PPF, a puzzle piece fit. You got this every now and then. Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State is this. Shane Beamer feels like he was born to be the head coach at South Carolina. South Carolina football existed to attract a guy like Shane Beamer to be the head coach. It helps a lot when the fan base wanted him to be the head coach. That's a few years back now. But if you'll remember when he was hired, sometimes a guy gets hired and the collective, attitude on the message boards and whatnot is, okay, whatever. Or what has this guy done to get the job? That was the opposite. You want to talk about an approval rating. The approval rating of the hire of Shane Beamer at South Carolina several years ago was like 90+%. So they loved it. They should have loved it. He's had one losing season there. And I want to remind you, he wasn't a veteran head coach. This is his shot. So while Kirby gets Georgia as his first shot, Ryan Day gets, Ohio State, Lincoln Riley got Oklahoma. Well, Shane Beamer got South Carolina. Historically, it's a lot harder to win at South Carolina than it is those previous three I mentioned there. Yet he's only had one losing season, and he's a fifth-year head coach. Logic would suggest he's still very much evolving. We always go back to the Nick Saban extreme example, but Saban was 53 and several years in to being a head coach before he ever won his first national title. And it's funny how he reshaped the world because everyone gets measured against him, which is insane. But Shane Beamer, only fifth season as a head coach. I really, really, really think that bears repeating. You'll notice I've already said it twice. Fifth year as a head coach. So what still hasn't fully developed about him? By the way, we had him on the show like a month and a half ago, and I asked him a version of that question. You'll remember he gave a pretty lengthy response about just the ways he's already changed, the ways he still could change. I just think he understands, and that program understands because of his vision, they can't just try and out Georgia or out Alabama by doing it exactly the way those guys do it. History says that's a losing approach for a second-tier program in the conference like South Carolina. Now, he would listen to that. Off the record, he would admit that's accurate. On the record, actually off and on the record, he'd say, well, who says we always have to be a second-tier program? And I respect that. I'm saying historically they have been, if that, in this conference. But my point remains. My point is they're very innovative. There's some avenues that they go down. There's some approaches that they take that you don't necessarily see a lot of the other programs take. Now, it doesn't always mean that it's going to yield fruit immediately, but I think he at least gets that. And the last thing they needed was someone to come in and look down the road in Athens. All right, Kirby Smart has built a mega power down there. We're going to copy and paste his approach and beat him. you may try and copy and paste his approach. You'll probably fail at that. But even if you succeed, you're South Carolina and they're Georgia. So it stands to reason the way you try and pull it off against the Georgias of the world is you do it your way after you define what your way is. And lastly, a guy we just had a sit down with the other day, Billy Napier's job approval rating at Florida amongst Florida fans right now. This is a fluid number, 53.5%. Again, scientific, of course. 8 months ago, I think this would have been under 10%. Because 8 months ago, we were in the middle of the season. 8 months ago, they were 3-3. And 8 months ago, not only had Billy Napier already lost his job, if you listen to pretty much everyone, they were already searching for his replacement. The most popular topic amongst Florida fans was not, how do you think we're going to do against Kentucky? It was, are we going to hire a guy before the bowl game if we make it? What's the buyout we have to pay Napier? Can we afford it? It was already an afterthought. And so certainly if you would have suggested we're going to keep him, that would have been torch and pitchfork time. His job approval was under 10%. Well then, as I've put it many times, they had the audacity to continue to compete. Then they won some games. Lagway was the turning point. His fate is hitched to DJ Lagway as it stands right now. But I will tell you, with the way they ended the season last year, and knowing Lagway's coming back this year, and just the other day I flat out asked him, is he healthy? He'll say, yeah, he's ready to go. He'll be ready to go for the season. Knowing that you've got that, knowing you got the returning production that they do, knowing you got the offensive line coming back, knowing you got the wide receiver room, knowing you got the high-end potential defensively that they do, it makes sense why he's 110% convicted in his approach. I said that last year when we were talking to him in spring. I said, you know, for all the people clowning this guy and thinking he's down there searching for a way, you'd feel differently. Now, you may still doubt him if you met him and talked to him, but you would feel differently. There's no searching. There's no feeling it out. They've got a very meticulous and clearly defined process. They don't bend on it. I think they've been extremely smart about the way they go about acquiring talent and putting their roster together. And what I mean by that is we're coming up on some pretty uncertain times, and there are some programs out there that have leaned out over their skis a little bit, and you don't know what the future holds. You're doing that in some very thick fog right now, and you could have a clean slope ahead of you, or you could have a giant tree ahead of you. They've chosen not to do it. Now, they're still recruiting at a top 10 level, maybe not a top 3 level, but they've also not overexposed themselves financially. And so, I mean, I really feel, and I think Florida fans as well, look at the roster and say, there's some stability here. There's some talent here as well. And we got a, murderer's row of a schedule again, but that's life as a Florida Gator fan. 2025 is the pivot year. 2025, this number could fluctuate literally 40 points either way because that's the fickle nature of job approval as an SEC head coach. So I put Napier 55%.